emotional catharsis and really planning for that.
I know a number of years ago LSD was or has been used by some therapists, and again there was a big controversial sandstorm as to what other agents is MAPS.
Well, right now we've helped support a study with psilocybin in the treatment of obsessive compulsive disorder, psilocybin from mushrooms. It's the first study in over 30 years in the United States in which psilocybin is being given to a patient population. The study is at the University of Arizona, Tucson, and it's psilocybin in the treatment of obsessive compulsive disorders. You know, we often talk about psychedelics as breaking habitual patterns so people can see things in a fresh way. And so people who have obsessive compulsive disorder have repetitive patterns that are disabling in one way or another that they feel compelled to replicate over and over. And so some people who've had this disorder ended up taking mushrooms for recreation, for fun, and discovering that their symptoms seemed to be reduced or diminished significantly. And they reported this to their doctors, and there was a few reports in the scientific literature about it. And so now we're trying to do a study to look at that more carefully. That study also took about 6 years to develop. Once it was approved by the FDA, the National Institute of Mental Health and National Institute on Drug Abuse refused to provide the psilocybin that we needed for the study. So we were delayed for 2 years while we tried to find our own independent source of psilocybin, which we finally were able to do. And MAPS has the dubious honor of having purchased the world's most expensive gram of psilocybin.
I'll bet.
Do you have any guess as to what 1 gram, what it cost us to have a gram produced that would be approved by FDA and available for use in human studies? So just think about a gram. Well, it's not very much stuff. Well, what do you think it would cost to produce a gram of psilocybin approved by the FDA?
Well, I don't. $100 to thousands.
Okay, it was $12,250 is what it cost us. $12,250 for 1 gram of psilocybin. That was all the analysis that needed to be done to demonstrate that it was pure, to pay the lab. There's not that many labs that can make it. You need special DEA licenses. You have to make it under special circumstances. Everything has to be accounted for. The DEA comes in and asks for all sorts of records.
You know that you're doing something that most of us would just consider inconceivable.
Yes, I've actually been able to buy psilocybin legally and then be able to use it legally in a context where people are being given it. We're also funding research in Russia with ketamine in the treatment of heroin addiction.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know, Bill W., who founded Alcoholics Anonymous in the 50s, had his own personal experiences with LSD after he was sober. And he felt that the whole AA model was based upon a higher power, religious context in some ways, surrendering, acknowledging that you're influenced by higher power, making remediation to people that you may have heard. But there's a sense that you need to end the whole rhetoric about hitting bottom and then coming to the other side. The idea that he had based on his own LSD experiences was that you can precipitate this removal of the mechanisms of denial. One of the biggest aspects of addiction is denial, and you can sort of strip away. That's why people have a lot of bad trips on psychedelics, is that the denial screen is removed and
right,
stuff
and it comes blasting. You're right.
All right. So with addicts, you want that to come up for them to acknowledge what they're doing to themselves and others, but you want it in a safe context where they can handle it, and then where they're supported to make the necessary changes afterwards. So ketamine is a drug that's a legal prescription drug. It's a dissociative anesthetic. It was the main battlefield anesthetic in Vietnam because you don't have to get it into a vein. You just can inject it into a muscle, and it doesn't affect your respiration, so that even though your mind is out and your body could be operated on and you're out of pain, it's a separation from the mind and the body. But it's not a life-threatening one, like many of the anesthetic drugs that are used by anesthesiologists depress the muscles and you need artificial respiration.
Right.
Ketamine you don't.
Right.
So what we use is 1/10 the dose that's used in operation. So you separate from your body, but you don't go so far out that you are knocked out and can't remember. And when you do this little separation, little part of the way, then you get this flood of material. And if you can work through it, oftentimes then people move to this sense of kind of a mystical, spiritual sense of connection with the universe. And that is where people draw strength from. So they're sort of an influx of information that if they deal with it right, they've got a greater honesty within themselves about what they're doing, and then you move into this sense of connection, which can be profoundly healing. And that's what the early research with LSD with alcoholics showed, is that those alcoholics that had this peak experience, that worked through the problems, had this peak connective experience, did better clinically, longer sobriety, than those that didn't have this peak experience. Right now, there's not a single country in the world that has permitted the legal use of LSD in humans. So there's absolutely no LSD research going on anywhere in the world. But in Russia, since ketamine was already a prescription drug, we were able to work with Russian doctor Yevgeny Krupitsky and start the research there. And that's the best, most well-controlled therapeutic research going on in the world right now with any psychedelic. And we're into a 5-year study comparing single doses versus multiple doses. We just finished a 3-year study that compared a high dose to a low dose placebo session and showed that a single session of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy really helped prolong sobriety in a statistically significant way. It doesn't cure everybody, and it's not the miracle cure, but it can be helpful in a larger context of therapy. So now, once we've showed that a single dose can be helpful, we want to get away from what we see as one of the core mistakes of the 60s, which was to conceive of psychedelics as a miracle cure, magic bullet, one dose, you're enlightened, you're better than anybody else, we're off into the counterculture, and we know more. And it was like hoping for a miracle. But psychedelics are not like that. They're not that powerful. You can have these powerful experiences, but to integrate the powerful experiences into behavior change is a whole different thing. That's the grounding, that's the integration, that's really the hard work. And so it's okay to hope for magic bullets, but to be realistic, we have to acknowledge that psychedelics work as an adjunct to psychotherapy over a longer period of time. So now we're trying to test out the hypothesis that multiple sessions will produce a better outcome than a single session. Multiple in this case is being 3. People will have 3 therapeutic sessions with ketamine versus those that have 1 ketamine session and then 2 placebo sessions, so that they have the same amount of attention from the therapist, and the major variable difference is just the ketamine. Then we're also trying to support projects that other people are doing that we're not actually funding, but we try to help them with advice on regulatory systems and do networking. There are people that are looking for ibogaine in the treatment of cocaine and heroin withdrawal, and also in the longer-term addiction. There's projects with...
Is progress being made with ibogaine? It's
Yeah, if people could look at healingvisions.org or ibogaine.org. Those are both websites that will teach people about ibogaine. There's no research going on in the United States right now, but there is research, quasi-research, I'd say, in St. Kitts, where people can come and they pay for their treatment. They have this several-day, 10-day drug treatment program, and it's involves an ibogaine session, which they, in a sense, get for free. And they're mostly doing a safety study. Dr. Deborah Mash is in charge.
cool.
There's actually, we have a section of the website that is called the Psychedelic Research Projects. And so you can see all over the world. If you go to our webpage and you click on that section, it's a list of all the psychedelic research projects around the world that we know of or that we're permitted to talk about. There are some projects that people don't want mentioned that we have not included in there because they're worried publicity might hurt their ability to conduct the studies. Not many of those, but you can look at the project page, and we're really trying in any way we can to facilitate the networking of information among researchers, to government officials, to users of these drugs in recreational and also therapeutic and personal growth contexts.
Well, Rick, I think personally, it's just a wonderful thing that MAPS exists, and that you guys are doing what you're doing. And I don't want to keep you from your other busy activities.
Okay, well, since we're here at a normal conference, let me just very briefly describe what we're doing with marijuana.
Great.
In order to make a drug into a medicine, you really need the drug. You need control over your product. What is it that you're testing? Right now, if you want to do research with marijuana, you have to get it from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Their mission, of course, is to prevent drug abuse, which they, of course, define as drug use. Drug use is the same as drug abuse.